FNAF just got a ton of news, including new development updates on the Ruined DLC finally, and also some official photos of the FNAF movie that fans have actually been pretty upset with. So starting first with the FNAF movie, I just talked about the film like a week ago, and again, we already have tons of news. The first thing we know is one minor casting update. We have Natalie O'Brien, who is going to be a costume designer for the film, and in fact, on her website, we could see the movie showing up, and upon clicking on it, we see this weird image of all the 4 classic animatronics and even Golden Freddy, leading to some people theorizing that Golden Freddy could possibly be in the film, because why else would they show this photo if he wasn't? Well, to be honest, I actually don't think this is inherently true, because if you do a quick Google search, you can find that this image from this website is actually just fan art of some sorts, and it's not actually any official photos from the movie or anything. So while it's completely possible that this is some sort of subliminal tease, in all honesty, Natalie probably just looked up the image online and put it on her website without giving it too much thought. The next piece of news is an absolutely massive one that you may have seen online recently already, but basically on Reddit, a user made a post titled, "Is there a movie?" showing us a photo of what looks like a sign for a location in the Five Nights at Freddy's film, which I'll break down here in a second. But the context behind this leak is that the OP supposedly works right next to where the movie's being filmed, and they just so happen to see it on the side of the building. Now, initially, there was no real way to prove if this was real, especially since there's been so much misinformation about the FNAF movie recently, but we can confirm that this is real because, for one, this photo was taken in New Orleans, which is the same place that the movie's being filmed, and two, the creators of the sign following this leak would end up releasing a video the same day that shows us exactly what it's going to look like and how it was built. Now, upon looking at it, it clearly has a much more retro aesthetic, almost directly referencing old Chuck E. Cheese type location signs, especially with the neon lighting and flashing bulbs. However, what's really important to point out about this sign is the name of the place on it, that of which being Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place. Now, this brings up a ton of questions for the film. The name Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place is not the same place as Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which is the original setting for the FNAF 1 game, which I thought this film was going to be based around. In fact, it's not even like this is some sort of continuity error or something, because in some descriptions of the FNAF movie, they literally say, Five Nights at Freddy's follows a troubled security guard as he begins working at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, which allows us to theorize that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza and this sign location, Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Place, are in fact 2 separate locations. In fact, this sign actually seems to rather be in reference to the pizza place that we built inside a FNAF Pizzeria simulator that was called the exact same thing. But then again, if we know that the pizza place and the Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria are 2 separate locations, does this mean that there's going to be multiple different places inside of the movie? Well, yeah, so it seems. I mean, I honestly don't know too much about the FNAF timeline, so I'm not exactly sure how far apart the first game and pizza simulator are, but this definitely suggests that some sort of time will be passing in this film rather than it being set in one specific setting or even location. In fact, this opens up millions of possibilities for animatronic appearances, because while we for the most part assume the animatronics we will see in the film are just the classic 4 and maybe a few extra here and there are theoretically tons of animatronics that could potentially feature in the pizza place, so that could be really interesting to see what they do. Plus, now we have evidence that this movie will be based around Five Nights at Freddy's 1 from the pizzeria in the description, Five Nights at Freddy's Pizzeria simulator from the sign, and also even Five Nights at Freddy's security breach, because we know Vanessa was casted for the film as well. So now I'm really just sitting here wondering, what in the world is this movie storyline going to be? In my last video, we found out there was going to be a total of 3 FNAF movies, and so naturally I thought they would be about FNAF 1, 2, and finally 3. But it seems like the first movie is going to be covering 3 of the games at once, so I'm really curious to see what they do in the future. However, in classic FNAF fashion, this sign reveal from earlier was not without a bit of controversy. See, this is the first look we've ever had into what the real-life Freddy Fazbear would look like, at least from the perspective of Scott and the creators of the games. However, to put it simply, people don't really like this Freddy design at all. For starters, I saw a ton of complaints because Freddy was wearing gloves, which is weird because we never see him with gloves. And I even saw some people saying that they just hated the art style altogether, stating, this isn't like some big major issue for the movie. Obviously, like, this sign is only going to be present for like a few shots, I assume. But that being said, it's still ugly, poorly colored, traced art, which is just so hilariously awful, it feels like a joke. I actually even saw some people fully redesign the sign, which do show the flaws a little bit more. However, in my opinion, I actually really like the way the sign looks. It definitely has that classic retro feel, and especially when compared to what's probably its biggest inspiration, Chuck E. Cheese, the art styles and looks are very much on the same level. And while some may not like the design, it definitely fits the era of this movie setting quite well, in my opinion. By the way, make sure to subscribe if you aren't already if you enjoy this type of content. It means a lot. However, However, moving on from the movie news, let's talk about the massive Ruin DLC update. So as you guys know, 9 months ago at this point, I think we got our very first Ruin teaser and our last Ruin DLC teaser, because we have literally heard nothing about it, which is surprisingly weird. I feel like we really should be getting some news at this point, especially if it's going to release this year in the next 10 months. However, while we have no official news, in the meantime, we got a massive development update that tells us a ton about the game. So if you didn't know, there's a website called SteamDB that allows you to track every updated build to basically any game, which of course includes Security Breach. In fact, just a few hours ago, we could see there was some sort of new version on the game adjusted on Steam, suggesting they might have made some changes to the game under the name Five Nights at Freddy's 9 Dev, Shipping, and Development. However, just a few days ago, 2 new build updates were put onto Steam, but this time the names were FNAF 9 Xbox DLC Shipping and Development. And this tells us an absolute ton about the developmental state of Ruin, because for one, this confirms that the DLC is of course actually being developed, and even better, it's probably getting pretty close to completion if they are already uploading the builds of it onto Steam. Now, it's completely possible that these builds are incredibly primitive and aren't really in a playable state. However, what's important to remember here is that these were titled Five Nights at Freddy's 9 Xbox DLC updates. So this was most likely some sort of test build for the game on Xbox consoles using Xbox controls. And while this may seem like a minor thing to mention, if you didn't know, the reason why games often take forever to release on other consoles, it's because porting them takes absolutely forever. In fact, the Xbox version of the base Security Breach game just released this past November, even though their exclusive contract with PlayStation expired at the very beginning of 2022. So it took the developers months to simply port the base game onto another console. Not to mention, it would be really hard to develop a game and port it onto other consoles at the same time. It just really isn't practical. So with all this being said, it honestly seems like the Ruin DLC has to be very close to being done, at least to the point where they are already working on putting the DLC onto Xbox and also, I assume, other consoles, which has to mean that the game is at least getting pretty close to being released, which is absolutely amazing news in my opinion. Now, admittedly, this update is incredibly vague, because who knows, maybe they're just working on an Xbox version for some sort of testing and they aren't really close to being finished at all, but it still at the very least proves to us that the Ruin DLC is finally going to be coming in the next few months. See, I remember a while back they said that they were getting ahead of schedule for the DLC, and I was wondering why, because we haven't really gotten any updates. But now, according to this, we have our first little bit of official proof that the DLC exists and is actively being worked on. In fact, since they just uploaded this build onto Steam within the past week, I wouldn't be surprised if this means that they could be preparing to finally roll out the DLC and maybe even give us some new teasers, or in the near future, even a trailer. That could be wishful thinking, but the DLC is coming soon, and while you wait, here's another video talking all about Ruin. Check it out, subscribe, and peace.